She told me to leave. I was standing in my own kitchen, holding a cup of coffee I had brewed in a coffee maker I bought with my own hands 23 years ago. The mug had a chip on the handle. I remembered exactly how it got there. My son Daniel dropped it when he was 9 years old, running to show me a drawing he'd made of our family. Back then, this house was full of that kind of noise. Crayon drawings, muddy shoes, the smell of something always burning on the stove because I was never a great cook, and my husband Raymond always said that with so much love in a house, a little smoke never hurt anyone. Raymond passed 6 years ago, and now here I was, Margaret Louise Calloway, 68 years old, retired schoolteacher, grandmother of one, being told by a woman I had welcomed into my family that I needed to find somewhere else to live. Her exact words were, "This isn't working for any of us, Margaret. I think it's time you look into a senior living situation." Not even a please. Not even the courtesy of meeting my eyes when she said it. And I want you to understand something before I tell you the rest of this story. I am not a dramatic woman. I don't make scenes. I spent 31 years teaching middle school English, which means I have more patience than most people acquire in a lifetime. I have survived grief and loss and loneliness and the particular silence that fills a house after the person you loved for 40 years stops breathing in it. I am not someone who falls apart easily. But that morning, standing in my own kitchen, in the house that Raymond and I built from the ground up, and I mean that literally, we laid the foundation ourselves with 2 contractors and a borrowed cement mixer, I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. I felt dangerous. Not in the way people mean when they say someone snapped. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't throw the chip mug. I set it down very carefully on the granite countertop that I had picked out from a showroom in 1999, and I looked at my daughter-in-law Vanessa, and I said, "All right, I'll make some calls." She smiled. It was the kind of smile that doesn't reach anywhere near the eyes. "I think that's really mature of you, Margaret. I know this is hard." I nodded. I went upstairs to my bedroom, with a window that looks out over the yard where Daniel used to catch fireflies in a mason jar, and I sat on the edge of my bed, and I started making calls. Just not the kind Vanessa was expecting. I should tell you how we got here, because this story didn't start with that morning in the kitchen. It started about 2.5 years before, when Daniel came home from a work conference in Phoenix with a new job offer, a brand new engagement ring, and a fiancée none of us had ever met. Her name was Vanessa Park. She was 34, sharp as a tack, worked in commercial real estate, and had the kind of confidence that you either admire or find slightly exhausting depending on the day. I tried very hard to admire it. I genuinely did. When Daniel brought her home that first Thanksgiving, I cooked for 2 days straight. I asked her about her work, her family, her interests. I learned she was allergic to tree nuts and reorganized my entire menu. I moved the guest bedroom furniture around because she mentioned she preferred sleeping near a window. I did all of this because Daniel looked at her the way Raymond used to look at me, and that was enough. That was more than enough. The wedding was small. Vanessa didn't have much family. Her parents had retired abroad and her relationship with her sister was complicated, she said, in a tone that made clear the subject was closed. Daniel's side filled 6 pews. I sat in the front and cried, the happy kind, the kind that sneaks up on you when you're not paying attention. They moved into an apartment across town. Life was fine, better than fine, for a while. Then, about 14 months into the marriage, Vanessa's commercial real estate firm restructured. She lost her position. Not fired exactly. The whole division was dissolved, which is a polished way of saying the same thing. And around that same time, Daniel got the kind of opportunity that doesn't come twice, a position managing infrastructure projects overseas, based out of Singapore, for 18 months minimum. He called me on a Tuesday evening, and I could hear the conflict in his voice before he said a word. "Mom, I don't know what to do. It's the kind of job that changes everything. But Vanessa's in between things right now, and I can't just." I told him to take the job. I told him I would be here. I offered, and I want to be very clear that this was my idea, freely given. I offered to have Vanessa move into the house with me while he was away. The house was big. It had always been too big since Raymond passed. And Vanessa would have company, a place to regroup, no rent to worry about while she figured out her next move. Daniel was so relieved I thought he might cry. Vanessa, when she found out, hugged me in the driveway and said, "Margaret, you have no idea what this means to us." The first 3 months were fine, quiet but fine. Vanessa was job hunting, taking calls in the sunroom, going to networking events. She was tidy, she cooked occasionally, she didn't leave dishes in the sink. We weren't close, but we were cordial. We watched television together sometimes in the evenings. It felt like something that could work. Then she got a new job, not in commercial real estate this time, in property development, and something in her shifted almost immediately. Not in a way I could name at first, just a certain loosening, a casual assumption that began to take up more space in the house day by day, the way a plant will spread toward light without you noticing until it's pressed against the window. She started redecorating. Small things at first, a new throw pillow, a different soap dispenser in the downstairs bathroom. I didn't say anything. People need to feel comfortable in their living space. I understood that. But then one Saturday I came home from my book club to find that she had taken down the gallery wall in the hallway. 23 years of photographs, Daniel's school pictures, Raymond's parents at their 50th anniversary, a photo from our trip to the Grand Canyon the year Daniel turned 16. All of it was in a cardboard box on the floor of the hallway closet. In their place was a large abstract canvas in shades of ivory and black that she'd ordered online. I stood in that hallway for a long time. When I asked her about it, she said, "The hallway was so cluttered, Margaret. I thought it would feel more open this way. Don't you love it?" And she tilted her head like someone waiting to be agreed with, not actually asking. I took the box of photographs upstairs and put it under my bed. After that, the changes came faster. She had a contractor come to give estimates on the kitchen, updating the countertops, she said, though the current ones were perfectly fine. She started referring to certain rooms as if they belonged specifically to her. My sunroom, my office. When I mentioned once that I used to use that room for reading, she laughed lightly and said, "Oh, you can still read in there, Margaret. I don't mind. I don't mind. In my own house." I called Daniel once carefully, not wanting to make trouble. He sounded tired and far away. It was late for him, somewhere over the international date line, everything strange and distant. I told him things were a little tense and he said, "Mom, just try to give her space, okay? She's under a lot of pressure." And I heard in his voice that he was under pressure too, and I let it go. That was my first mistake. Not the only one, but the first. The dinner party was where things truly cracked open. Vanessa had taken to hosting, friends from her new job, colleagues, people I had never met who came into my house and spoke to me with the specific kind of excessive politeness people use with someone they've been warned is a difficult situation. One evening, one of her colleagues, a young woman named Britt, asked me how long I'd been living with Vanessa. She phrased it exactly that way. Living with Vanessa. I said, "Oh, I'm not living with Vanessa. This is my house. Vanessa is staying with me while my son is abroad." The table went very quiet. Vanessa laughed, that same laugh, light and papery, and said, "Margaret is a funny way of putting things." I looked at her across the table. I smiled. I excused myself and went to bed early, and I lay in the dark for a long time thinking about Raymond, about the morning we signed the deed to this property, about how he kissed the top of my head and said, "Maggie, whatever else happens in this life, you will always have this." 2 weeks later, she asked me to leave. And here is the first thing nobody expected, including me. I wasn't the least bit surprised. I had been waiting for it. I had started preparing the moment she took those photographs down, because I am a retired schoolteacher, yes. But before I was a schoolteacher, I was the daughter of a woman who taught me to read a room before I trusted it, and I had been reading this room for months. What Vanessa did not know, what Daniel, bless his tender heart, had apparently never thought to mention, was that this house was never in Daniel's name. It was never in our joint marital name. It was in my name alone, Margaret Louise Calloway. It had been in my name alone since 1997, when we paid off the mortgage, because Raymond had been dealing with a business dispute at the time and we'd been advised to keep our personal assets separate. We never changed it. There was never a reason to. Raymond trusted me absolutely, and I trusted the paperwork. So when Vanessa told me to look into senior living situations, she was operating under an assumption. She assumed that when Daniel and she married, the house was part of a shared family inheritance, something that belonged to all of us equally, and that she therefore had standing to negotiate. She had mentioned once, casually, that her new job was in property development, that she had a good eye for what a space could become. I had not put those pieces together in time to stop the dinner party, but I had put them together long before she stood in my kitchen. She wanted the house, not as a home, as a project, as an asset. I made my phone calls. The first was to my attorney, a woman named Gloria Chen, who has handled my affairs for 15 years and has never once been surprised by anything I've told her. I asked her to pull the deed and send me a copy. She did it within the hour. My name, just mine, clean and clear and unambiguous. The second call was to my neighbor and oldest friend, Ruth Ann, who has a guest room and zero tolerance for nonsense. I asked if I could come stay for a few days while I sorted something out. She said, "Bring the dog and come for dinner." I don't have a dog, which she knows perfectly well, but that is Ruth Ann. The third call was to Daniel, and this is where the story becomes something I am not entirely proud of, not because I did anything wrong, but because the truth I learned on that call broke my heart in a way I was not prepared for. Daniel picked up immediately, which surprised me. It was morning in Singapore. He sounded awake and strange, and before I could say anything, he said, "Mom, I was about to call you." There was something in his voice. Not guilt exactly, closer to relief, the way people sound when a secret they've been carrying gets taken out of their hands. He told me that Vanessa had called him the night before, that she had told him she'd spoken to me, that I had agreed it might be time for a change. He said she had already been in touch with a real estate attorney, not Gloria, a different one, about what it would take to have the house assessed for a potential sale, with the proceeds split between family members as a kind of informal inheritance arrangement. She had described it to him as a plan we had all discussed together. We had discussed no such thing. I had agreed to nothing. She had constructed an entire architecture of consent that had never happened. But here is the part that broke me. My son said, "Mom, I know it's not ideal, but Vanessa thinks it could be a really good financial move for everyone. And you'd be comfortable somewhere smaller, right? Somewhere easier to manage." He believed her. Not because he is a bad man. He is not. He is fundamentally good, which is the most painful part, but because it's always easier to believe the person you're sharing a bed with, even across time zones, than the person you've known your whole life. Because love does that. Because the version of events that required the least conflict was the one he chose. I was quiet for so long that he said, "Mom, are you there?" I said, "Daniel, this house is in my name." Another silence, longer this time. "What?" "The deed, it's in my name, has been since 1997. Your father and I never changed it. Vanessa cannot sell it, assess it, or make any arrangement about it without my signature, which I will not be giving." I heard him exhale, and then I heard something I hadn't expected. He started to cry. Not dramatically. Daniel cries quietly, always has, the same way Raymond did, but I heard it. He said, "Mom, I didn't know she was doing that. I didn't know she'd gone that far." And I believed him. That is the hardest part of this whole story. I believed him completely. Because a liar would have recovered faster. A liar wouldn't have sounded like a 23-year-old boy who just realized he'd let something terrible happen inside his own family. I told him I was going to stay with Ruth Ann for a few days. I told him not to call Vanessa yet. I told him I needed him to trust me one more time the way he used to when he was small, and I'd say, "Just wait. Just be patient. This will make sense." He said, "Okay, Mom." "Okay." I packed a bag. One bag, very calmly. I took my photographs out from under the bed. I left the ivory and black canvas on the hallway wall. And then I went downstairs and I told Vanessa I'd made arrangements, just as she'd asked, and that I'd be out by Thursday. She hugged me. She actually hugged me. I let her. I want to tell you what happened next, because this is the part where I learned something that still gives me chills when I think about it. While I was staying at Ruth Ann's, Gloria Chen, my attorney, did some routine research. Standard stuff, the kind of background checking you do when a situation gets complicated. And what Gloria found was this: Vanessa had done this before. Not this exactly, but something close enough to count. Her previous marriage, a marriage she had never mentioned, that Daniel apparently knew about only in the vaguest possible terms, had ended with a property dispute. Her former husband's family home, which he'd inherited from his parents, had been appraised and listed while he was recovering from surgery. The case had been settled out of court and the details were sealed, but the outcome had not been in her favor, and she had left that marriage with nothing from the property. I sat with that information for a day. Just sat with it. Then I called Daniel and I told him everything Gloria had found. I gave him no editorial commentary. I read him the facts. I heard him go very quiet in that particular way of his, and then I heard him say, in a voice I hadn't heard since he was a teenager, "What do I do, Mom?" I said, "That's not for me to answer, sweetheart. But I will tell you this. Whatever you decide, the house stays in my name, and the house stays in the family. Those are the only two things I am certain about." He came home 3 weeks early. His company let him work remotely for the last stretch of the assignment. He walked into that house with his suitcase and found Vanessa in the sunroom with the contractor, discussing the wall between the kitchen and the dining room. I was not there for that conversation. Ruth Ann and I went to a late lunch and split a piece of lemon cake. She told me about a book she was reading. We sat in the afternoon light and didn't talk about any of it for about an hour, which was exactly what I needed. Daniel called me that evening. He said, "Come home, Mom." The divorce was filed 6 weeks later. Vanessa moved out in November. She tried, through her attorney, to claim that her improvements to the home, the canvas, the new soap dispenser, a few $1,000s of decorative changes, entitled her to some form of compensation. Gloria dispatched that claim in a single letter that I was told was impressively efficient. But here is what I want you to understand. Here is the part that I think about most. The morning after Vanessa left, I woke up early, 5:30, which is my usual time, the one Raymond always called my embarrassing habit. I went downstairs. I made coffee. I stood in my kitchen with a chipped mug, I'd taken it with me to Ruthens and brought it back, and I looked out the window at the yard. The oak tree in the back corner had lost most of its leaves. November does that. But there was frost on the grass, the very fine kind that catches light like glass, and in the early morning everything looked still and silver and completely quiet. Daniel came down about 20 minutes later. He's never been a morning person, but he came down in his socks, hair uncombed, looking the way he used to look as a teenager when something was bothering him. He poured himself a cup and stood next to me at the window. We didn't say anything for a while. That's one of the things about people you've known your whole life. The silence doesn't need to be filled. Finally he said, "I'm sorry, Mom. I should have listened to you." I said, "You're here now." He looked at the frost on the grass. "Do you think," he stopped, started again, "do you think Dad knew that you'd need it to be in your name?" I thought about that, about Raymond at 38, signing that paperwork, kissing the top of my head. Whatever else happens in this life, Maggie, you will always have this. "I think your father knew me," I said. "I think that's the same thing." Daniel nodded. He drank his coffee. After a minute, he went to the hallway closet and got the cardboard box out himself, without me saying a word. He spent the whole morning putting the photographs back up. He got the spacing slightly wrong on 2 of them. He was never good at eyeballing level lines, same as Raymond, and I fixed them after he went to make lunch, and I didn't tell him. Vanessa's canvas went into the garage. I didn't throw it away. I'm not a person who wastes things, but I did turn it toward the wall, which felt like enough. I put the kettle on. I heard Daniel in the kitchen, opening and closing cabinets the way he always did, looking for something that had always been in the same place. I heard him find it. I heard him start to hum, something tuneless, something from no particular song, just the sound a person makes when they're at home. That sound, that ordinary, unremarkable, completely priceless sound, was worth every single thing this cost me, every photograph in the box, every sleepless night at Ruthens, every careful, quiet, patient thing I had done and not done and waited to do. I stood at the kitchen window with my chipped mug in my frost-covered yard and 43 years of memories inside 4 walls that had my name on them, and I thought, Raymond, you knew. You always knew. Some people assume that when you're in your late 60s, the story is winding down, that the interesting parts are behind you, that you're just filling time until something smaller comes along. Those people have never met a woman who laid her own foundation. I am still here. This is still my house. And every morning when the light comes through that kitchen window, it lands exactly where it always has. Some things don't move. And some women, no matter what anyone decides for them, simply don't leave.